Let me read to you a passage from the 15th chapter of St. Luke's Gospel, verses 1 to 3 and verses 11 to 32. It's the Gospel for Saturday of the second week in Lent. St. Luke writes, "Now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering round to hear Jesus. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law murmured, 'This man welcomes sinners and eats with them.' Then Jesus told them this parable. There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, 'Father, give me my share of the estate.' So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, 'How many of my father's hired men have food to spare, and here am I, starving to death. I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired men.' So he got up and went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms round him and kissed him. The son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his servants, 'Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate, for this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' So they began to celebrate. Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked him what was going on. 'Your brother has come,' he replied, 'and your father has killed the fattened calf, because he has him back safe and sound.' The older brother got angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, 'Look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him.' 'My son,' the father said, 'you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad, because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.'" That's from Luke chapter 15, verses 1 to 3 and verses 11 to 32. Speaking to us of God's love. You know, if one is to make any observation about the history of religion or of the content of the religions of man, well, one must fall back on general impressions. It would be impossible to do the research necessary to document the matter exhaustively. That having been said, my own impression is that outside the Judeo-Christian revelation and those religions influenced by it, such as Islam, the gods of the religions were not concerned about sin as such. The heavens or the underworld were peopled by deities of various descriptions and rank, and they lived their own lives while possessing certain powers over the course of the world. They were supplicated and appeased by religious rites, and so their protection was obtained. But their interest, in the main, was not directed to sin and its removal. The gods do not want to be irritated, but it is not objective immorality which irritates them as such. Indeed, many of the gods are caught up in sinful activities themselves. Accordingly, salvation from sin was not generally the purpose of religion, although doubtless there were some exceptions to this. Now, there were numerous things that stood out about the religion of the Hebrews. One was its insistence on one God, perhaps beginning with the insistence on the worship of but one God, and then insisting on the existence of but one God as an essential corollary. Secondly, this one and only God was holy, he had no sin, and refused to allow sin to be committed. If it was committed, he would punish the sinner. Sin was not just anything which irritated his preferences, rather it was that which was objectively bad. It was wrong to steal, to dishonour one's parents, to commit adultery, to murder, to bear false witness against another, to covet another's wife or goods. These things were wrong in themselves, and were therefore not to be done, and if they were done, there would be a rupture in the relationship with God. God was holy, and commanded holiness in his people. So the idea of sin, and punishment for sin, and alienation from God as a result of sin, were key ideas in the revealed religion of Israel. The problem obviously was what was to happen with the sinner, for all it seemed were sinners. As a matter of fact, the whole story of Israel, as documented in its inspired writings, was a chronicle of inveterate sin. This is why there was a further fundamental idea in the religion of Israel, but it did not have a great deal of clarity. The God of the Hebrews was intent on doing away with sin, which is to say, on cleansing his people from their sins and making them acceptable to him. Moreover, this was part of the blessing to be brought to the nations. Salvation from sin was yet another novelty brought to the world of religions by the Hebrew revelation. The promise was there, but not in clear outline. How it was to be done was yet to be revealed. Various prophets had announced it, but its outlines were somewhat vague. Salvation from sin. Even though much of the ritual was ordered towards the taking away of various sins, this was not a root and branch answer to the problem. As an aside, I would see in this fact a reason for the lack of a strong redemptive motif in Islam, for Muhammad drew much from the Jewish faith, and Islam lacks the fall and an answer to the fall. But Jesus Christ came to take away the sin of the world, and he did so by his death and resurrection. This is the fulfillment of the Old Testament revelation about sin, together with other teachings about God that are unique to the revelation of Jesus Christ. This salvation from sin is a signal novelty in the history of religion. But more than this, it is out of love for sinful man that God sent his only begotten Son to take away sin. God, it has been revealed, for all his hatred for sin and his refusal to brook it, loves with undying love the sinner. He is prepared to do anything for sinners, and he sent the eternal jewel of his divine life, his Son, to die that we sinners might live forever. This good news of the love of God for sinful man is not absent from the Old Testament, but it did receive a stunning fulfillment in the New. In this further sense, God has spoken definitively and finally in his Son Jesus Christ. God, the all-holy God, the God who hates sin and who commands us to be holy, loves us with a boundless love, us who are sinners in his sight. Now this is the context of our gospel today that I read earlier from Luke chapter 15, when our Lord explains to his critics why he is associating with the publicans and sinners. He is the revelation of a God who is a loving Father. His parable of the prodigal son is a parable of the Father who is so prodigal with his love. It is imperative that we immerse ourselves in two great facts. Firstly, that God, the Creator and Lord of heaven and earth, loves us with an infinitely tender love. Secondly, that we are sinners in his sight. We absolutely must learn the facts of our situation. We are sinners by birth, by conception, and by personal decision. We have no right to the love of God, but we have it. The one thing that God asks of us is that we recognize his love and that we set about the business of renouncing sin and sinning no more. Let us make this a fundamental program of daily life, and specifically of Lent.